You have heard me state over the years that I enjoy preaching, especially in December. And I've thought a lot about that. I think it's basically because there's a lot more smiles on people's faces. We concentrate on giving. There is a more generous and more thoughtful and more compassionate attitude during this month than at other times. So this morning I want to talk about extending the season. Now, as we think about this time of year, I think that we are challenged to make sure that we are sticking with what the Bible actually says. We deal with the fantasy of Santa Claus, and we deal with the fantasy of Rudolph and Frosty the Snowman. Mixed in with that, we have Christmas itself, which was started as a pagan holiday. And then, because of the challenge of that, the Catholic Church began what we refer to today as Christmas. And some of the things that we see today portrayed are simply not biblically accurate. Many times when you see what is supposed to be a Christmas scene, you'll have Mary supposedly riding on a donkey to get to Bethlehem. And the Bible really doesn't say anything about a donkey. The narrative will talk about three kings. The Bible really doesn't say that. We talk sometimes about three wise men. The Bible doesn't say that. It does talk about the three different types of gifts. We sometimes hear about an innkeeper. The Bible doesn't say that there was an innkeeper. There was an inn. The Bible doesn't say anything about a stable. It does talk about a manger. And I guess maybe we assume that there is a stable. But these things are recorded in Matthew chapters 1 and 2, and also Luke chapters 1 and 2. And so I think it would be good for us to go back and look at what the Bible actually says, and realize that many of the things that are talked about are simply not based upon what the Bible actually says. This morning particularly, I want us to think about the good things of this season and extending those things. You probably heard the song many times, as I have in the last few weeks, entitled, "We Need a Little Christmas Now." But the origin of that song, it was started as a part of a play. And as I remember correctly, a lady had lost everything, maybe in the stock market crash, that type of thing. And it wasn't at Christmas at all, but it was much earlier. And she said, "We need a little Christmas now." And then Elvis Presley sings a song, "If Every Day Were Like Christmas." And I don't know exactly what was intended there, but in the song he talks about the singing and the happiness and the giving. And you know, all of those things are biblical. We find the importance of serving others and giving to others as a very foundational biblical principle. And I think that we need to think about the things that we do for others, the giving, the compassion. Those are things that we need to practice in January and February and every month of the year. The book of Isaiah has 4 what are called servant songs. The first is in Isaiah 42, beginning in verse 1. The second one is in Isaiah 49, beginning in verse 1. The third one is in Isaiah chapter 50, beginning in verse 4. And then the final one is in Isaiah 52, beginning in verse 13, and it goes on in to chapter 53. And it is difficult at times to know exactly who the servant is in these 4 songs. But the very essence of the life of Jesus Christ is found in these Psalms. In Matthew chapter 20, verse 28, Jesus said, I did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. That was his purpose. And it is our purpose to be compassionate. In 1 Peter chapter 3, he talks about loving one another and being compassionate. And in Romans chapter 12, he talks there, the Apostle Paul does, about being willing to weep with those that weep and rejoice with those that rejoice. There are numerous passages in the Bible that put an emphasis on us being concerned about other people, loving other people, reaching out with the blessings that God has blessed us with, and reaching out to touch the lives of other people. In Ephesians chapter 5, verses 15 and 16, the Apostle Paul encourages us or challenges us to redeem the time. And he says that we should do that because the days are evil. Well, we need to redeem the time. We need to be conscious of the fact that time limits us from being able to do good things, to truly be the kind of servants that God wants us to be. To extend the season. Again, we think a lot about the giving of gifts. We think a lot about, preparing food for those that don't have enough to eat. We think about the card that Marshall mentioned a few minutes ago. And, the good that we do with the giveaway day. We need to do more of that. We need to spread that out to other times of the year. There's a beautiful story that's told about a little 6-year-old boy. This is a true story. At the time, his mother was 26 years old. The little boy was dying with leukemia. And she, like any mother, loving her children, of course, was deeply torn, deeply concerned. And she asked him one day towards the close of his life what he wanted to be when he grew up. And he said, I've always dreamed of being a fireman. And she said, well, we'll see if we can't make that come true. So she went down to the firehouse. This was in Phoenix, Arizona. And she met the fire chief, a fellow by the name of Bob Klein. And Bob was a big man, but he also was a man with a big heart. And she told him about her little boy's wish and asked if he might could bring the fire truck and at least let the little boy ride around the block in the truck. And Mr. Klein said, we'll do better than that. He said, if you'll have it ready next Wednesday morning, 7 o'clock, we'll come get him. And we'll keep him all day long. And not only that, he says, if you'll give me his sizes, I'll get a fire suit made for him. They produced them there in Phoenix, so it was close by. Well, they picked him up at 7 o'clock on Wednesday morning. I had his suit, he had his hat, he had his boots, he had everything to look like a real fireman. And he went on every call. They had 3 calls that day. He rode in the ladder truck. He rode with the chief. He experienced all of those things. Truly fulfilled this little boy's dream. In fact, maybe that had a lot to do with the fact that he lived 3 months longer than they thought he was going to live. But that day came when all of his vitals began to fail. And the head nurse remembered that day. It had been on the news, and she had been a part of getting the little boy ready. So she called the fire chief and wondered if somebody might come to be with the little boy when he left this world. And the fire chief again said, we'll do better than that. He said, we'll be there in about 5 minutes. He said, you announce to the hospital that there's no fire because we're going to have the lights flashing and the sirens blasting. And he said, open the window of his room. He was on the 3rd floor of the hospital. Well, they came, put the ladder up to that, and 16 firemen climbed the ladder into that little boy's room. They took turns hugging him and crying with him. And as they all stood around with family, the room packed, the little boy looked at Chief Klein and he said, am I a real fireman now? And with tears in his eyes, Mr. Klein said, you sure are. Those were the last words that Billy spoke as he left this old world. You and I may not know a little boy with leukemia, but I can guarantee you that all of us have a neighbor. All of us know that the nursing homes have people that have no visitors, and have no family, or have no family at least that cares. All of us have a little lady or a little man down the street that's lonely. All of us know that there are individuals around us who are not going to have a feast that you and I sort of take for granted. You know, we need to extend that, not only this time of the year, but we need to be more like Mr. Klein was and go above and beyond to reach out to those that are hurting and those that are suffering, and do it not only now but throughout the year. Another 6-year-old boy, his name was Bobby. Bobby's daddy had died when Bobby was 3. There were 4 kids in the family. Bobby had 2 older sisters and a younger sister. And the mother worked nights at the hospital. She did the best that she could, but the money was tight. It was Christmas Eve, and Bobby had not gotten his mother anything for Christmas. He's out in the backyard, sort of walking back and forth in the snow. Bobby really doesn't have much of a coat, doesn't have any boots, just some sneakers, and he's cold, but he's even more worried that he can't think of anything that he can do for his mother to give her a present. His 3 sisters had already made some things, and they had something for her, but he didn't. And he was tore up about it. He stood in the backyard for a while, and he finally started down the street, just looking into some of the store windows at the beautiful things were there. And so many things he would have liked to have gotten, but he didn't have any money. He eventually turned and started towards home. And as he did, he saw something glistening there alongside the street. And he looked, and it was a new shiny dime. And he felt like he had $1 million. He had a dime. He went into the first store that he came to, and he was told very quickly by the clerk that you can't buy anything in here for a dime. Sort of cold water on his thoughts and his dreams. Discouraged, he turned and he saw a flower shop, and he thought, maybe I can get one flower with this dime. And he got in line, and eventually his turn came, and he told the gentleman that he had a dime. He said, can I buy a flower? And the older gentleman looked at him for a moment, and he said, I think we can do something. He said, you wait here. And the man was gone for quite a while, and all the customers left but Bobby, and he wasn't sure if he was going to get anything or not. We saw the man come out with 12 long stem red roses, the prettiest roses Bobby had ever seen. And he knew that wasn't for him, not for a dime. But sure enough, the man said, here are these flowers. I'll put them in a box. You take these to your mother. And Bobby hesitated because he knew the dime wasn't enough. And the man said, these are special. He said, as of right now, I have them on sale for a dime. And he handed the box to the little boy. The little boy went on his way. The storekeeper's wife came in about that time and said, what did you do with those roses? And he said, well, there was a little boy in here. And he said, I remember when I was 10 years old. I didn't have anything. And there was a man who gave me $10. And I thought I was on top of the world. He said, when I saw a little boy, it reminded me of that. As they closed up the shop and made their way home on a bitterly cold evening, the man and his wife were both warm. And they were warm because of what they had done and what they had experienced. Again, I suggest to you that there are folks all around us who are hurting, who are suffering, not only at this time of year, but throughout the year. Many of us remember the name Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson was the first black man to play Major League Baseball. And he had a terrible time that first year, especially. People yelled terrible names and insults from the stands. People would throw things. The opposing teams would write terrible notes and pass it to him. It was just a terrible thing as that conflict between white and black was going on in the baseball world. Jackie played for the Brooklyn Dodgers. And one day in Boston, Jackie had made a mistake. He'd committed an error. He was standing up on second base, humiliated because of the error, but that day was even worse. People were just yelling and screaming, terrible names and things at him from the stands. The shortstop on that team was a man by the name of Pee Wee Reese. And he called a timeout. And he walked from shortstop over to second base where Jackie was standing. And he simply stood there and put his arm around Jackie Robinson. And as he stood there, folks in the stands got almost deathly quiet. Jackie Robinson told about that, and he said that arm around his shoulder saved his career. And it changed many others as he continued to play ball. I suggest to you that there are those all around us that just need someone to put their arm around them, someone to give them a smile, someone to give them a word of encouragement. Again, not only at this time of the year, but throughout the year. This is a time when we do more of that, when we get together with family and friends, and we talk and we visit and we encourage one another and we laugh more. We need those things throughout the year. A young lady was in nursing school. She was in her second year. And she was at that point where she was doing her time at the local hospital. And it just so happened that she had to work on Christmas. She was pretty sad about not being at home because it was the first time that she hadn't been with her family on Christmas. And as she went to bed on Christmas Eve, she was thinking about that. But she knew that she wanted to be a nurse, so that was a part of it. She got up the next morning and made her way to the hospital, and she worked in the medical surgical unit. And she began to do her rounds, and the very first patient, as she was checking this person's heart, someone behind her said, "Missy, do you want anything from the cafeteria?" And it startled her a little bit. She turned around, and here was this big man. His name was George. And he had an old faded red shirt, and red baggy pants held up by suspenders that looked like they were about ready to fall off. They were so worn. In fact, he had everything but the beard. He didn't have that appearance. And he again repeated his question. And she said, "No, thank you, I'm fine." He said, "Well, I'll be right back." Well, he stayed with her all day long. Every patient that she saw, he was around encouraging visitors that were there on Christmas Day. He talked to them, but especially the patients that had no visitors on Christmas Day. He spent time with them. He read cards. There was a man by the name of Jenkins that was there. And he received a letter, but his eyesight was such he couldn't read. So George sat down and read the letter to reading, he noticed that Mr. Jenkins didn't look right. So he called for help, and they avoided a diabetic coma, they thought. But George was telling jokes, some of the same jokes, all day long. But he stayed all day long helping and cheering. Well, this young nurse didn't have a chance to ask any questions until late in the day. But when she went to eat, she was there with a staff nurse that had been there for years. And she said, who's this George character? And she said, well, it happened about 10 years ago. His wife was seriously ill. Actually, she was dying. And George never left her side. He was here. He helped her with everything. But while she was taking treatments or while we were working with her, he started visiting the other patients and talking and helping and assisting. And she said that on Christmas Eve, I helped prepare his wife for sleep. And I heard their prayer. And they prayed that God might take away this misery. And she said, I heard George pray that if God would just go ahead and take his wife home, that he would be a volunteer for the rest of his life on that holiday. Well, she did pass away that night. And for those last 10 years, George was there every Christmas morning, spending the entire day encouraging and lifting up. You know, I suggest to you that we need to be doing more of that. There are those in this group that make some regular trips to the nursing home. Miss Lita does that, I know. Patty has a program that she has self-started, and others of you go. There are folks there that they don't have any visitors. They don't have anybody to read to them. You see, we can get so caught up in ourselves that we forget that this goes on. And it is probably more important next month and the next month than it is right now. They'll have more attention during the holidays, but those eventually will come to an end, and those folks will be left all alone. Frank Wilson was 13. Frank had had a good Christmas on Christmas Eve, received the presents that he'd asked for, but he was still sad because his brother Steve had been killed earlier in that year, car accident, and it bothered him. So he decided that he wanted to sort of get away from the family. He'd gotten a new sled for Christmas and some other things, and he was a very avid Boy Scout, and he wanted to show his gifts to his Boy Scout leader. So he loaded everything on his sled, told his parents where it was going, he'd be back. And so he started off. The Boy Scout leader lived in what they call the flats. This is where the poor people in that particular community lived. And he went to the Boy Scout leader's home, and he was disappointed because his leader wasn't there. So he started back home, but as he started back home, he came by a very poor-looking house, and he could see through the window, and he saw the stockings hung up, and you could tell they were empty. And there was no fire in the fireplace, and he noticed a young woman sitting there crying. And he thought, I'm not done my good deed for the day. So he went and he knocked on that door, and this mother came to the door. And when she saw the gifts, she thought that he's collecting donations. And she said, I don't have anything. She said, I can't help you. I don't have any food. I don't have anything for the kids. And he said, no, ma'am. He said, that's not why I'm here. He said, pick out whatever you want off this sled for your children. She couldn't believe it. But she picked out some candy and a little toy plane and a flashlight that some of the Boy Scouts used. And she said, what's your name? And he said, well, just call me the Christmas Scout. And went on his way. But he found another home and another, and by the time he left the flats, he'd given away his sled and even the coat that his grandmother had given him just a couple of hours before. He made his way home, still sad. sad, now he's cold. And he's thinking, what's Mom and Dad going to say? Well, sure enough, they asked, where are your presents? The first thing they asked him. He said, I gave them away. And his dad said, you mean you gave what your grandmother gave you, the coat, what your Aunt Susan gave you? And he just stood there. His dad said, well, we don't have any more money. You know, that's it. And he went to bed that night, somewhat heavy-hearted. The next morning, Christmas morning, the parents were listening to the radio, and the announcer broke in or came in between the songs and said, we have a beautiful story to tell this morning. And Frank had just come into the room, and the parents are listening, and the announcer said, down in the flats last night, there was a little crippled boy that's got a new sled. And there's another little boy that's got a brand new plaid coat. And there's another family, and on and on. And the announcer said, we don't know who did it. The folks said it was just a teenage boy that called himself the Christmas Scout. Well, Frank's dad put his arm around him and said, we didn't know. Mama cried and said, we're proud of you, son. You see, those are the kind of things that you and I can do. We can do those things tomorrow. We can do those things next week. We can do those things in January. Jesus came to serve. We need to be careful that we're not so wrapped up in all of the frills, that we're not so wrapped up in all of the materialism, that we're not so wrapped up in all of the fantasy that we forget that we have a responsibility to be like Jesus Christ, to be compassionate and loving. We have the privilege of being confessing Christians. When you act on your faith and you're baptized into Christ, repenting of your sins, you then become a child of God, added to the church. You know, what a privilege and what an honor. But a part of that is that as that child, you then get to represent Jesus Christ. We get to represent Jesus, and Jesus was loving, and He was kind, and He was giving, and He was sacrificial, not just one time a year, but every day of His life. Jesus was looking to help. He was looking to serve. He was looking to lift somebody up. Some of these stories, they touch our hearts. But these are realities. These situations are all around us. From the children's hospital in Chattanooga with little children that are dying, to the elderly person in the nursing home that has no family and has nobody. You and I can make a difference. We can make a difference. And if we are Christ-like, we will be making a difference. Maybe we all need to privately ask God to forgive us of not being more giving throughout the year. But then there may be something of a public nature. Or maybe you need to become a child of God. If so, the invitation is yours as we stand.
Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, another day we have the opportunity to come and worship you. We pray that our worship service today has been pleasing to you. I wish we thank you for this time of the year when we all celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. We're so thankful that he came for the blood that we cannot understand. We're so also thankful for the death of Jesus Christ, which he came and died, gave his blood, washing away our sins. We pray that there is no one here today that does not know you as their Savior. Our message today has stirred their lives so that they become closer to